Hello, hello, party people. All right. Get the show on the road. Just make sure it's like working and stuff. Oh, there's the dog. Hello. Getting all set up. There's my face. All right. Looks good. All right, so I don't do 1,000,000,001 live videos, so if something's glitchy or you can't hear me good or something like that, just comment. I have my laptop pulled up and let me know. So we had some good questions posted underneath. I'll get to those. I want to make sure if anyone wants to get on the chat that they'll have time to do that, and so I'll kind of go through my spiel a little bit about prebiotics and probiotics before we do that. I love live videos. I'm like comfy, got my slippers on. This is great. Okay, so looks like we've got somebody on here. Awesome. It doesn't show me live on my computer, but I'm assuming it's working, so we're gonna go with that. Okay. So, when we talk about prebiotics versus probiotics, pre and pro, right? So probiotics are the microbes themselves. And I talked about this in the lecture, but there's a lot of people in the class that weren't at the live lecture, so I'm going to go over it a little bit tonight with you guys. Probiotics are the microbes themselves. They're the bacteria, right? And so when you look at a probiotic bottle or something like that, it's going to have the CFUs, and that's the colony forming units. And it's going to have a number probably in the billions, the millions to the billions, right? Concentration 2 billion per capsule, guaranteed throughout the shelf life. That changes based on each company. So when you go to the store and you buy a probiotic, it says it has however many million or billion, but there's not a lot of quality control that's actually saying how many of those little dudes are still alive in there. So I have a couple companies that have been independently researched by different like Consumer Reports, Labdoor, those kind of things, that are a lot more researched. And so I go for those, and those are the ones that if you take them, you have a noticeable difference, because I really don't like taking things that I don't feel a benefit from, right? And so BioCults is one of those. BioCults you can buy. It doesn't have to just be by like a practitioner like myself. You can actually get BioCult like on Amazon or something like that. And this is a good one because it doesn't have to be refrigerated and it can kind of travel well. When we start talking about yogurt and like dairy or dairy-free yogurt, when we talk about dairy-free yogurt, BioCult is one of the ones I use to make coconut yogurt. So that's a decent brand. They have a kids version of this, which has some good omegas in it as well, and it's a little satchel. That's a good one for kids. Here's my beef with probiotics, which some of you got to hear. You're welcome for my rant in the class. But some probiotics are fussy, right? And it makes sense. They're living organisms. They have needs, I guess, is a good way to describe it. But I have concerns when we talk about a probiotic that if it gets too warm or something like that, that it's going to die. So there's a lot of probiotics that are like that. Claire Labs and Nate, this is one of the brands that I use and recommend. It needs to be refrigerated. Oh, it's kind of bright, like super bright. It says keep refrigerated, right? And you have to pay extra for the refrigerated shipping and all of that jazz. My concern is this here, like as soon as it goes in your mouth, obviously it's getting warm, right? Once it hits your stomach, it's like hell up in there. There's acid and bile salts, and I know people have really compromised digestion often, so like not good quantities of stomach acid and all those things. So, but still, I feel like if they're so fussy they're not going to survive, what's the deal with that? Like if you're going to swallow them and then hope that they make it from here to the large intestine to colonize where we want them to be in the gut, right? So I do still recommend them. I see therapeutic benefits. There's great research on lots of different strains. Like if we're talking about Saccharomyces boulardii, which helps like fight yeast. It's kind of like this yeast on yeast battle when we have candida overgrowth or something like that. So for sure benefits. But what's the long term? Like what's the longevity here? So we're talking about probiotics and what the benefit is. Hi, Jesse. So, so I do use those. I do recommend those in particular brands for sure, which I will post below. You guys will have access to FullScript, which is my online dispensary, and you can just check them out. You don't need to buy them, but then you can see the ones that I have done a lot of independent research on, so you don't have to research them yourself. And then what about these awesome and then, so I'll get to your, hi. And so then there's this guy. So there are enterocoated is a different type of supplement. It's got this casing on it that's supposed to survive all the digestive enzymes and make it to the gut to colonize. But I haven't seen a lot of good research on those as of yet. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. This is the only thing I bother to keep in my office. I don't like to sell stuff. I don't have a brand or a company. I don't like make a profit off of things like this because I enjoy teaching and educating. That's where I enjoy, having my business be. But this is one of those few things that's worth the hassle, and that is called its Megaspore biotic. It is a specially little dude that has like a turtle shell over each little bacteria. It's from nature. It's not like created in a lab. It's grown in a lab, but it wasn't like mutated from some GMO or something crazy or whatever else. It really is a real deal. And they are specially designed to survive, to make it through the hellfire that is our digestive tract, to make it to where they need to colonize. Then they have these little chemical mediators, like everything in the body like signals each other, right? It like signals by chemical signals and all that cool stuff, and relay systems. It finds colonies of harmful bacteria, plants itself there, so actually is attaching and like doing something, and then releases antimicrobials around it. So it kind of kills the area around it, which is planted itself in this harmful bacteria place. And then it goes to town. So it's created real estate, right? Because when we talk about microbial balance dysbiosis, which we talked about in this video, like what's the imbalance, what's the problem? It's when we don't have the good guys, enough commensal helpful bacteria in enough quantity, and they have enough real estate in the gut lining. So this is one of those things that will do that. You have to be careful with this guy because you can't just buy it over the counter, because it is legit and you will feel something. So you guys are on the inner circle now because I'm going to talk about my bowel habits. Whose husband didn't want to be in the group because he's like, they're going to talk about poop, I'm sure. Yeah, that's totally going to get it. Oh, this is Megaspore. It's a probiotic, but it's a specific strain of bacteria that has a hard shell coating on it. So I'm just talking about different types of probiotics. And then I'll post links to all this stuff so you guys can research it more. So I eat fermented foods, which we're going to talk about in a minute, is a much more efficient way of recolonizing the gut. But I do try everything that I recommend. And so I gave this a try. I was like, okay, well, I've done a ton of research on it. A lot of the different, groups that I'm in and forums, everyone's freaking out about it. And I'm like, all right, I'll give it a go. Oh my gosh, there was significant battle of the microbes happening. It was like a whole new layer of gut recolonization for me. And you could just tell by the smells that were coming out of me, and not just like gas. It was like my armpits stunk more, my breath smelled more. I had a little bit of a die-off episode. So that was really cool to notice and to have a noticeable difference with a probiotic. Which over the years, I've tried lots of different ones, and of course do the fermented foods. So let's talk about, so that's our probiotic, right? We're looking for diversity in strains. We don't want 100 billion of a single strain unless we have a targeted goal in mind and you know what your dysbiosis is and you're going for it. We want diversity. So like I showed you earlier, this megaspore, it has like 15, maybe 18 different strains of bacteria that have been studied, and different blends, of course, and all those things. So we're looking for quantity and diversity. Those are the two things you look for in a probiotic that you can get over the counter, or through FullScript, which I'll give you guys a link to later. So let's talk about prebiotics. So for those of you that weren't in the live lecture, prebiotics are microbial food. It's what feeds the good bacteria. So I'll post a list that has lots of different prebiotic foods, so you don't need to worry about that. I'll just share it out with you. Basically what those are, these non-digestible fibers, these prebiotic fibers that our own body cannot digest, but that feed the good bacteria, and then they in turn take these prebiotic fibers and turn them into short chain fatty acids that we super need for antioxidant benefit, for reducing cholesterol, like tons and tons of heart healthy metabolic needs for these short chain fatty acids. Are any of the probiotics vegan? Yes, and I will make sure that I get you a link, Diana. There's a lot of them that are like grown in like whey or something like that, and I have people with allergies or casein or whatever, and I will make sure I get you a link of the vegan options that I recommend for sure. Thanks for asking that. That was a good question. And so these prebiotic foods like chicory and inulin and Jerusalem artichoke and even the skin of apples, all of those things are prebiotic foods that feed the commensal bacteria. So that's a really great start to start feeding the good guys, right? So probiotics, they can change the gut flora, we're going to call it, in about 24 hours or for about 24 hours, and then they don't do you any good anymore. So they're not recolonizing the gut. They're not actually changing it for good, right? A combination is absolutely useful, absolutely, of probiotics and prebiotics, because you're trying to shift the balance so that you increase the good bacteria that you already have. Like I said in the lecture, your microbiome is mostly formed by the age of 3. But even when we have a balance shift, like if the bad guys take over and they're causing health problems, that doesn't mean that you've lost the strains. You don't actually lose entire colonies. They just get really, really insignificant, and they don't have what we talked about before. They don't have real estate, and they don't really have a voice in what's going on in your body. So great start is in increasing the prebiotics, right? All right, so let's talk about yogurt and kefir. So those are kind of these symbiotic foods that have the prebiotics and the probiotics. So what's happening when you lacto-ferment, when you ferment yogurt or get your kefir grains growing, is that you have the bacterial food and the bacteria themselves in the mix. So you're getting probiotics and prebiotics. So those are winners for sure. Oh, I love this. Okay, so I know a significant amount about epigenetics. So genetics, nutrigenomics, understanding how the gene regulation, how genes go up and down and mutations change our health and stuff like that. I'm not near as an expert as some of my colleagues, but I do have quite a bit of education. One of my favorite things in the world is that fermented foods have the ability to alter epigenetic switches. That means if we have a gene that codes for a certain thing and it's mutated or it's like going haywire, whether it's upregulated and it's working too fast or it's downregulated and it's moving too slow, our body it compensates, right? But as we age or if we have stressors or things like that, that kind of hijack it. These switches can go on and off. You can't change the genes themselves, right? But you can change how the switches turn on and off, how it's functioning. Fermented foods actually alters epigenetic switches in favor of the body. This is like new. I did not know this until recently, which I just think is amazing. So the process of fermenting, right? So how this is actually going down, and the reason that it's a probiotic food is the bacteria that was on the sauerkraut and on my hands, or on the cabbage and on my hands and my daughter's hands, if you watch the video, because she helped make it, her poor dry hands, is starting to digest. It's eating the cabbage, and that's fermenting the food, fermenting the cabbage so that it increases the bacterial strains in it, and then it turns into this really bioavailable. The nutrients that are in there all of a sudden are accessible way more to the body because they're kind of pre-digested for us. And that's why people that have like lactose sensitivities are often okay with eating yogurt or some things like that, because the lactose is already kind of digested for them by the probiotics. Cool, right? Okay, so prebiotics, probiotics, good and bad, right? Fermented foods, kind of the sweet spot of all of those. Bianca asked a great question. One of those was, I know pickles had been mentioned, she said, and what's the deal with that? Can that be a fermented food? So the pickles that you buy at the grocery store are pickled. They've been used, there's vinegar, and that process is different than fermenting. You can easily make a lacto-fermented pickle, and it is simple. So I don't have my own recipe that I've created for those because other people have done it just as good. Like, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel or anything like that. So I will make sure that you guys get a link to that and a couple recipes that I know would be good, because you can turn those into a fermented food. Absolutely. The other question she asked, which I'm really glad she did, because this course is really focused on the bacteria, right? It's the microbiome part of it. It's understanding, we're going to talk in the future classes about, the weight management and specific strains for that are really, independently researched and really cool. We'll talk about symptoms like eczema. Excuse me. We'll talk about eczema and how to restore balance to the biome that's on the skin. We'll talk about the mouth, right? What is all of this, mouthwash and all these things? How is it changing our health? And kids that are really prone to cavities and things like that, what are some options for them? But Bianca asked a great question, which was, okay, so if eating fiber is a really great first step, right? Because in the first lecture, it was like, okay, more color, more diversity. And I gave you those spectrum, all the phytonutrient, recipes and how to get your colors in each day because of all of the diversity of the nutrients. She said, but since my gut is so messed up, how do I even know if it's working? So great question. Thank you. It's so individual where people need to start to restore balance to their gut. I don't ever see it as a bad thing to remove things that hinder the health of the microbiome. So decreasing processed foods, sugars, wheat, gluten in particular, right? So this gliadin grain and the gliadin protein that can cause some damage and inflammation in the gut. When I work with clients on a one-on-one basis, I often help people through what's called a 5R program. It always starts in a different place though. So remove is number one. So by telling you to add in more color and diversity and whole foods and whole grains and all of those things, I kind of assume that by adding those things in, other things are going to get removed because you're not going to eat those as well as your old staple foods. So removing potential allergens, inflammatory foods is a great first step. People can be really sensitive to fiber. There's people that have, irritable bowel issues, and the FODMAP foods, the easily fermented, different types of fibers cause a reaction. So removing those for a period of time to reduce inflammation can often be a good thing. When we look at healing the gut, and this will be, I think it's next week, when we talk about common GI disorders, I sneak in a little bit of the 5-hour program, and I give you guys a lot of tools to kind of do this on your own. So this is not a gut healing, like how to rebuild the gut from scratch kind of course. It's all about the microbiome, but I kind of am just putting it in there anyways because, like I told you before, I love free stuff, and so I figure other people do too. So I'm going to give you some of the nutrients, some of the herbs, all of those things that can help restore balance to the gut and to help you understand a little bit a strategic way for your own self to go about that. Do you need to start repairing first? Is there a lot of damage to the gut lining and the mucosa? Do you need aloe? Do you need glutamine and zinc and those kind of things? And I'll give you guys a digestive questionnaire that you can do on your own. And you can look at the 5-hour protocol and kind of try to understand that yourself. That is something that I work with clients with a lot because it's so individual and you got to just be strategic. But I can give you guys a lot of tools to deal with that, Bianca. But that's kind of next week. So you just anticipated next week's topic. So good job for that. All right. What else? How about any other questions? Got 2 ladies here on the call. I love the vegan question. That was good. I should have had prepared something for that. Nice. Thanks. I know we talked a little bit about having to remove consistently. So if you're doing low FODMAPs or something like that, or you've removed gluten and dairy, and even a little exposure to gluten or dairy or high FODMAP food or something like that causes a reaction, right? You haven't really healed the problem. You haven't increased resilience. You're still highly sensitive. So even with my clients who have celiacs or something like that, we work really hard to restore health and balance to the gut so that if you do have an exposure, if you do, want to not live on a restricted diet for the rest of your life, obviously avoiding foods that aren't really nutrient dense, like processed grains and things like that. Processed foods is not going to be healthful, but I sometimes like a cheeseburger, or something like that I wouldn't typically eat or wouldn't have been able to eat a couple of years ago because my gut would just be wrecked and I would be spending quality time in the bathroom after that. So so increasing resilience is going to be a big one, and restoring balance to the biome is a huge part of that. One of the 5 R's is re-inoculate, which means make sure that the balance to the gut is there and that there's enough good bacteria and few enough harmful pathogenic bacteria that our bodies can function the way they're meant to and process hormones and do all of those things. So when we talk about prebiotic supplements, I think there's probably a time and a place for them. I haven't used them much in my practice, mostly because if you're eating a whole foods diet, you're getting prebiotics every day. There's just not a huge need. I sometimes do, soluble fiber or something like that from plant fiber sources for people, which can be beneficial, especially there's a particular brand when I do my little detox class and people are having detox symptoms and they hate me. And then they love me at the end, but they kind of hate me in the middle when they're feeling kind of miserable, is a soluble fiber that has a lot of the pectins and different things that acts like a mop, and it just absorbs all of that chud and all of those toxins that are just gunky and causing them discomfort. So there's definitely a place for fiber supplementation, I think, in a lot of cases. And And that'll be something a little bit more for the 5R, the GI disorders lecture next week, and we'll talk about different options for types of fibers, as well as, you know, those supplements for gut healing, or things that are found in nature like bone broth and things like that, which are high in glutamine, depending on, you know, your eating habits or whatever. And you can always, of course, find other options that aren't meaty. So, all right, do you ladies have any other questions? It's probably too early to ask fermenting questions because nobody's probably really started yet, unless you guys are already experts and you've already done it. Awesome. Okay. Well, I think those were the big questions. So here's what I'll be doing. I'll say it again to remind myself. I'll be posting different brands of probiotics that I have taken and do recommend. I will be, that's a good question. I will be answering your questions on the Facebook group, like as they pop up. I will be sharing with you guys that list of the prebiotic foods for those of you that weren't in the lecture and either maybe don't follow me on Facebook, which I think you all do. So, but I'll still post it in here, list of prebiotic foods. And be giving you guys a link to Full Script, which is my online dispensary, which you can just like peter around, like look in it and check it out, see some of the different categories that I like kind of starred, because those are the ones that in grad school when you had to like research stuff, I researched them and I can tell you that they're legit. So Jessie says, my daughter is fructose intolerant. She has to take acid reducers when she gets stomach pains. Is there something that can help with the fermented foods? Yeah, so interesting. Fructose intolerant. So one of those FODMAP foods, right? When we look at the body's inability to break down fructose, that's often... So what's happening, I'm not diagnosing because I don't know your daughter's exact case. What often happens is what we have is a rebound effect. So the body needs more stomach acid. Typically what happens is manifesting high stomach acid means we've got this negative feedback loop happening, and it really means we have low stomach acid. But it feels like we have high because what happens is the stomach acid kind of comes late to the party. So the food goes in and we should have this right pH level balance happening here. And what happens is the body goes, not enough, not enough, not enough. But even when the chyme has gone down and it's starting to digest, the body is still like, we need acid, we need acid. And you're like, no, wait, that ship has sailed, right? We've moved on. So symptomatically, people often have relief that suffer from high stomach acid symptoms by supplementing with stomach acid because it gets the body on the right loop. Fermented foods in this way absolutely change the pH of the stomach in a beneficial way. You've probably heard people doing like apple cider vinegar or something like that to lose weight or to, increase their stomach acid or something like that. And that is because it actually does alter the pH. And it's got these probiotics, in the live rags, that has the little floaty dudes in it. But because it's enhancing the stomach acid, then people don't have symptoms of this like kind of what I call a rebound acidic response to the body needing more. So my guess is if she's fructose intolerant, if she gets exposed, excuse me, if she gets exposed, her stomach she's not breaking it down, and then the body causes a response and the stomach acid tries to rise up, but it's kind of too little too late, and then you've got symptoms of acid reflux, which is painful. Increasing the mucosa is going to be something that would be really helpful because it adds another protective layer so that acid that's there doesn't burn, right? Because your stomach can digest itself. Like that's what, heartburn and acid reflux, it's like happening. It's you're kind of digesting your own tissues, your own gut lining. But small amounts of fermented foods can absolutely enhance the good pH levels. And I think I have a good research study I could point you towards for kind of IBS, fructose intolerant symptoms, and fermented foods, and the kind of the correlation with the stomach acid. I'll look that up for you. That was a good question. Thanks. All right. Well, we're just about at our half-hour mark. But if anyone else wants to pipe up, I have time for one more question. Yeah, I'll definitely send you that. I'll just post it on here. I'll find it. I have so many research articles saved. It's obscene. Super nerd, you guys. Oh, man. All right. So we went over prebiotics, right? Microbial food feeds the good guys. Probiotics, the actual dudes themselves, that even though they can help shift the balance for a period of time, they don't really change the actual colonization of what's going on. We talked about fermented foods, which are those like probiotics and sometimes the prebiotics mixed in there, which is handy when we talk about yogurt and kefir and things like that actually change epigenetic switches and can actually alter how our genes express themselves for the better. So there'll be a class coming up in a couple months at Sculpt from my mentor and who was my nutritionist to begin with Joanne Butler, who is an expert on nutrigenomics, and she'll be talking about epigenetics a lot and how we regulate these switches, things like MTHFR and all these things that people are freaking out about. And then next week will be GI disorders, weight management, kind of understanding good versus bad, like what are the actual names of these crazy guys and why do we care. We'll go over gut healing, even though that's not huge part of this class because I'm passionate about it and I just want to give you guys resources. So there'll be questionnaires to like give yourself or your kids, in some people's case, on digestive health and kind of where is a good place to start, trying to help identify the actual core imbalance of the gut. What's the biggest need? Is it bacteria? Is it healing? Is it creating a good mucosa? Is it tight junctions to get those guys sealed up so bacteria and whatever else is not floating back and forth in proteins? And then next week will be the salsa, the fermented salsa video, which is our absolute favorite. It's so easy. I mean, sauerkraut is it's not hard, but it's a little bit more challenging to incorporate. I never can think of a bad time to have salsa. I just can't. It goes with all the things. So that video will be next week, as well as our Q&A on something of which I can't remember, but I will remember by next week. Yes. Yeah, gut healing is a huge passion of mine. Microbiome is a massive part of that, but it's one of the modalities. It's one like arm of gut healing, which, you know, that's what this class is about, but I'm going to throw that other stuff at you guys and see what sticks. So I will be teaching a class this fall on just the 5R, and then I'm going to create a teachable course to help people do it themselves. Like, you can DIY gut heal yourself for sure. So currently being treated for SIBO, following FODMAP eating. Start with fermented foods during this treatment. So that would someone's being treated for SIBO or SIBO, depending on how you like to say it, following low FODMAP. So these probably a specific carbohydrate, right? Can I eat fermented foods during this treatment? So it depends on who you're doing it with and what their strategy is. A lot of people, practitioners, don't like to do any add any, what's the word I'm looking for? Probiotics or fermented foods in during the antimicrobial phase, because as it says antimicrobial, right? It is the clean out phase. Everyone has a different opinion, so you'll have to ask your practitioner about that. When I walk people through a SIBO protocol, or SIBO, I don't know how to say it, I always say it different each time. My personal opinion and my research indicates to me that I always do a layer of gut healing first, so that when the die-off occurs, there's less symptoms. And then I do one round of Saccharomyces boulardii before, because symptoms of dealing with SIBO can be not fun, especially when you're on those candibactins or whatever protocol, whether it's biotics or metagenics or whatever kind of system you're doing. It can be kind of hard on your body. And so I always like to lay a little bit of foundation first. When I recommend my clients to do the, I do a combination SCD and FODMAP recommendation for my anti-candida diet and the antimicrobials. I don't have them eat fermented foods in that time, during that period of time. Mine is only 2 weeks long. And so it's just a short little window that we stop the probiotics and we stop the fermented foods. But there is a lot of people, a lot of practitioners who are smarter than I, that continue probiotics and fermented foods throughout. They feel like it shifts the balance even quicker. So because you're not one of my clients, I would defer to your practitioner that you're working with on their preference. I am moving towards increasing the probiotics during the antimicrobial phase, during the die-off phase, because I think there's a lot of new research coming out that shows it actually may be beneficial. Kind of like people were always freaked out about antibiotics and probiotics at the same time because they're like, oh, they're going to counteract each other. And then we realized that wasn't true. There was an incredibly synergistic effect of having the probiotics and the prebiotics at the same, the probiotics and the antibiotics at the same time. Man, there's so many biotics. Just so many. So they realized that, and I think that's what's happening with SIBO treatment, is that the research is actually coming out that there's not a reason to skip it. But that was a really long way to say you have to ask your practitioner that's helping you with the SIBO. Sorry, that was just like a long way around it. But those are the two schools of thought, and I'm the one way, and I'm becoming the other way, I think, based on the new research that is emerging and the people that are at the cutting edge of the field, which is actually one of my mentors and professors, Oscar Coates. I can't actually say his last name. My husband said he needs help getting it all out. Yes, some people can be full of it. That's for sure. Increasing that gut health will definitely start shifting that balance. I had when I started the Megaspore probiotic that makes it all the way down to the gut and survives enough to colonize and start shifting the balance. I definitely had realized that I had a little built up that I didn't know was there. Like something had died. And I practice what I preach, people. I really do. I promise. Besides the occasional dirty martini, which, come on, just gotta give a girl a chance. But yeah, that will start shifting the balance for sure. Or he can take my detox class. That'll clean him out for good. All right. So many good questions. Anybody else? Thank you. This has been really cool. So, all right. So if you guys have, sorry about that. If you have more questions, feel free to post them. I'm going to be headed out of town this weekend and doing like super fun spring breakish type stuff with the kids, but the stuff will still be posting. I'll still have access. We'll still do our Facebook Live next week. If people have comments about a better time for them, I'm happy to adjust. We can pick another day, another time, but as it goes, we'll continue with this schedule unless people let me know what's up. So this will be available afterwards to watch for those people that weren't here, and they can ask more questions. That's kind of why you're here, to find stuff out. I can't wait. Please start your sauerkraut. You've got your video. Next week, salsa. Next week, lecture on GI disorders, gut healing. I'm sneaking in there, even though it's not technically really microbiome stuff. And weight loss. And you'll get to hear my mouse story again with the Cinderella mice, which is my favorite. So, all right. All right. I will talk to you guys soon. Feel free to post any questions. I'd love to see pictures of your ferments as they're going. Hopefully some people are getting motivated to try them, to get the old cabbage out. Next week salsa. Week after that's the easy one. I give you a break after that before we go into yogurt, which is not super easy. But we'll do some ketchup and some mayo. That takes like 10 minutes. I'm doing that with my 7-year-old who's got the shortest attention span. But he does love dips. So awesome. All right. I'll talk to you guys soon.